Hi, guys, and welcome back to Mystic Mamas. I'm your host, Dakota, and today we have a very special guest on the podcast. Her name is Annamarie Green. She is a licensed clinical social worker, also known as a licensed therapist, and a professional intuitive. She combines her professional training in social work and psychology with metaphysical and intuitive practices. She is also a mother and so much more. I really got to work with her last week. I believe it was on Thursday. And man, it was such an eye opener. I was hit in the face with a lot of my shadow work that I need to come back and do. But yeah, so we'll get more into that, I'm sure. I just want to say thank you so much for being here, Annamarie. Danielle and I both really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Our pleasure. And so we'll just go ahead and jump in. Just give us a little bit of your background and how you got into the work that you're doing now.
Yeah. So, like you said, licensed clinical social worker. So I graduated with my master's in social work from the University of Pittsburgh in 2019. Before that, I got my bachelor's of science in social work in 2018. And then I started working and I became a therapist during the middle of the pandemic, which was a very, very fun time. I learned very quickly on my feet. But at the same time, I was also going through my own individual, personal, emotional healing journey. I had lost my partner in 2019 to suicide. And so I was dealing with such heavy grief and just all the things like being a single parent, trying to get through grad school, trying to navigate the world. And I was not doing well at it, even though I was in active therapy. So I started to dip my toes into intuitive energy work. I had a friend who was like, I think you should just like go to a reading and just see how it goes. So I did. And once I got my first reading, I was like obsessed because it was the first time that I'd ever felt like somebody truly understand me, because I had tried multiple therapists and I'm really good at doing the work. Like I'm really good at like, okay, you give me something to do, I would do it, but it still wasn't moving the needle. And once I started dipping my toes in, it was like all these light bulbs were going off as to what I was doing and what I was helping clients with. And looking at my own personal journey and how energy healing and energy work go hand in hand with mental health and just understanding what's at the root issue. Especially because with talk therapy, what I was realizing was that our ego is in such control of it most of the time, that even the healing that we think that we're doing sometimes is just surface level, and it's what our ego is comfortable talking about instead of the nitty gritty. So like my partner's passing was terrible and there was a lot of grieving and it was a very big moment for me, but it was layered in with these other root wounds of like abandonment and fear of abandonment that were now putting so much more pressure on the grieving that I was trying to go through and process. So, and then I started to add a sprinkle here and there into my therapy practice. And once I became a certified professional, like intuitive healer and reader, which was like a 3 to 4 month program, I kind of came out of the spiritual closet and was like, this is what I'm doing, guys. And I started offering these readings that were specifically around mental health. And I tried to do like the regular readings of just like, okay, purpose and stuff, but the mental health always came into it. So that's how I got into this work. And I also saw how much it helped my daughter, even though she was only 1.5 when her dad passed. There was still stuff that like she kind of goes through and to help her process her own grief and feelings and just help ground her and things like that. It's helped to know some of the intuitive work side of stuff.
Wow, that's crazy. I've never even thought about, you being able to work through grief with a 1-year-old, because I have one right now, right? And
Yeah.
I don't know, I can't even think about that. I can think about regulating like we do, like breathing in and breathing
Yes.
out.
Yeah.
Okay, so is it like similar to that?
It is. So the younger that she was, now that she's 6, we do a lot more of like, okay, we talk about the stuff, we talk about the feelings. I'll even like have her, close your eyes. I'll teach her how to ground and start to connect intuitively. But when she was younger, it was a lot more of me doing the healings on her to help like soothe her body, to help her energy feel good in her body, to help emotions to not get stuck. So that way she slept easier. So that way she didn't feel so anxious. And then it wasn't until this year where she started doing like her own little energetic protection. So she does it before she goes on the bus. But before then, that's what I was doing.
That's so amazing. It makes me want to learn this work too, just so that I can pass it on to my daughter as well. I
Yeah.
just feel like so impactful, so amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. we'll go into the next question. It's just,
Okay.
what is intuitive therapy and what are the
Yeah.
benefits of it? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so intuitive therapy is essentially really a really beautiful combination of psychotherapy and energy work, energy healing. So you're using similar like frameworks depending on the therapist. Your therapist can specialize in different ones. For me, it's cognitive behavioral therapy and psychoanalytic is where my foundations of what I learned. Um, and then so you're using those same kinds of framework, but then you're also bringing in the energetic side of it. So for me, we don't just do an intake session. So I treat the mental health clarity session as an intake session
Mm-hmm.
because we're getting to, okay, here's the root issues and here's what we need to process, because that's going to set us up for the treatment planning. So you're using that intuitive aspect of it, but also still going to use the frameworks that you would use in traditional therapy to help them verbally process and mentally process some of these things. And then we're also adding on energy healings. So, when I'm reading somebody, I'm also doing energy healings, but in intuitive therapy, at the end of each session, we close with an energy healing so that, okay, we've brought all these emotions up. They're now on the surface. So we're not just like, okay, I'm just going to sit with these. We're going to clear that energy. We're going to look at something on the other side of it and allow ourselves to let go of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it always leaves clients feeling so much better, even though we talked about stuff that they're like, oh my gosh, like that was such a heavy topic that I forgot about, or whatever the situation was. And so it's really bringing those two together. We're not just clearing on one level, we're clearing all three. And
Mm-hmm.
so one of the things I tell people is that mental health exists on three levels to me. There's the energetic, the physical, and the cognitive. Traditional talk therapy exists on the cognitive level. So it's using the mind, it's using your ability to intellectualize, your ability to like think of things with like chronological order. So think of it as very like the academics, I guess, whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
you're using the mind to try to heal the other layers as well. And it's not that it doesn't work; it just takes a lot longer,
Mm-hmm.
especially because the mind is actually just like the translator between the raw energy of our soul and our physical body. So it's taking information through sensations that our body is getting, and it's translating it into raw energy, and it's taking information from like our essence, soul, the collective, and turning it into sensations for the body. But when we're just trying to change both of the other two levels through the cognitive, it can also feel very exhausting, and it can feel very unsafe. So it's really also taking it and looking at it like, let's heal the energetic first so we have a clean slate to jump off of, and it makes everything else more effective. And then we'll move into the physical and cognitive.
Yeah, just to, I guess, be vulnerable here. Whenever
Yeah.
you gave me all that information, I don't like it, just brought up so much for me that after we left the call, I felt extremely exhausted and like
Yeah.
drained. And it's
Yeah.
obviously not because of what you told
Yeah.
me. I mean, it is partly, right?
Yeah.
There's just
Yeah.
like memories popping up as
Yeah.
soon as like you're bringing up all my past lives. And then
Mm-hmm.
also what I've maybe went through in my younger years. Really,
Yeah.
I did go through. I could think of every
Yeah.
scenario every time you were speaking
Yeah.
to me. And yeah, it just made me feel very, I think, overwhelmed,
Yes.
honestly. But
Yeah.
the past couple of days, I'm not too sure if this is something that's normal, but I had
Yeah.
like these really vivid dreams.
Yeah.
And okay. And
Yeah.
now I'm understanding what is going on. Almost
Yeah.
like it almost like clicked fully for me.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I have a podcast on this that I can talk about. Yesterday, because we didn't meet, I ended up
Yeah.
making a podcast on it.
Oh,
But
cool.
so I don't know when that will be out, but they'll hear it
Yeah.
eventually.
I love that.
But I just talked about how like I figured out one of the root like beliefs that I've been holding on to that I thought I worked through was I am not good enough.
Mm.
And it really came up for me like through everything that you were speaking with me about.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so it's magical work, and I don't think I expected to get so much out of it.
Yeah.
Honestly, I
In
didn't know
one
what
session.
to expect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's something that nobody else is really doing it, and that's not
Mhm.
I hope that other people start doing it. I want to train more people to do it, but
Mhm.
it's something that's so new that a lot of people, when they receive it, unless somebody else they knew received it, they're like, I don't really know what to expect. But the clients who have experienced it are always like, it's like a year's worth of therapy in 60 minutes. Like all of a sudden you're like
Yes.
and so it does. Everyone's always like, it's a little bit overwhelming. So I always say, I was like, take a day, listen to it again when you're ready. But like, it's okay that you're processing, like all these things are coming up. And also because I'm healing things as I'm in your energy is completely shifting. So it is going to feel a little bit overwhelming. The dreams are normal. I have had clients who like also are like, I was so thirsty afterwards. Like there's just lots of kind of
That too.
effects that you feel afterwards. And it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. But I'm glad that like, you're like, okay, I'm making these connections. And then all this, that's what I love about it though, is because you're no longer like, oh my gosh, what is wrong with me? Why am I still so anxious? Even though I've been in therapy for 3 years, why am I still not getting to where I want to go? Maybe I'm just incapable or not meant for it. But it's like, no, here's the actual connections. And then also here's the kind of way out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I loved about it, that you gave me a way out of it. I need to go back and watch so
That's
that I can
okay.
figure out what to do again. It
Yeah.
was a lot of information, right? Like we're
Yes.
saying, but
Yes.
no, I really appreciate that call. And for anyone
Yeah.
who's listening and is intrigued, like please go book one with her, because
Thank you.
you'll literally get a year's worth or years, like
Yeah.
multiple years worth of therapy in
Yes.
60 seconds. I was telling Danielle about it too. And I was like, you
Yeah.
have to book it. She was like, I'm
Yeah.
going to. I'm like,
Oh,
okay, good.
good. I'm so excited. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I love them. They're my favorite way. They're what I wish that I had when like after my partner had passed and I was like in therapy, but it wasn't working. And I literally thought, I was like, maybe I'm just going to be this broken forever. Maybe this thing just like truly broke me and I'm just meant to exist from this broken place forever. And yeah, so this is what I wish that I had had back then.
I feel that honestly
Yeah.
deep. And I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about grief, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course, of
Um,
course.
yeah, just because, I went through a lot of grief when my dad passed. I don't know if I even told you that. I literally couldn't even speak because
That's okay.
part of me, whenever we were having that, like, you call, I was like,
Mhm.
I almost felt like I was the one unloading on you when you were the one telling me all of my stuff,
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah.
And so, like, I just sat there. But
Okay.
yeah, like, what are some of the ways that you can move through grief, if maybe it's recent or not recent?
Yeah. So one of the things with grief, well, there's a couple things that I would say. Like the first thing is like I tell people, I was like, wherever you're at in your grief journey, that's okay. So like I know for me, one of the best things that I did learn from that process is that it's okay. It's going to come in waves. There are going to be
Mm-hmm.
times when you feel like you are drowning and you are so upset and you are just like, nothing will ever, I will never, I remember at one point being like, I'm never going to deeply laugh again. Like I was like, I feel so heavy. I feel so like stuck and in this just like pit of blackness. But you will over time, like the things so let yourself have those, let yourself surrender to it. Let yourself, and I mean that in like the healthiest way of like, if you are crying all day, like especially in the beginning, like that's okay. It is okay. Also, I would say that the grieving process to me really takes at least like 6 months to a year, like to get to the place where you don't feel like you're drowning. And that is if you are not numbing yourself. So many times people are like, okay, like the first month is really when people expect you to like, okay, you can kind of fall apart. And then after that month, they're like, okay, but you should be good, right? Like
Yeah.
it should be a thing. And that's not usually the case. And that's okay that it's not the case. When we are grieving and we feel that deep sadness energetically is our soul asking for community and connection, to surround ourselves with people and to let them show up and support us. That we get really lost in that because we feel like we have to be moving so fast all the time. And that was one of the mistakes I made. Was I was like, no, I'm going back into work. I'm going back to school in, a couple months. And I was taking like 22 credits and I was working, like it was just, I was doing too much and I was numbing with things to do. And if you find yourself doing that, try to slow down and I know that it hurts, like it like you don't want to face it, but just surrendering to it and letting it wash over you, because on the other side of it, you're going to feel a little bit better. What we want to watch out for is when we feel that grief, especially when it is with a person who we felt truly saw us. So for my partner, he was the only person like at that point in time that I had truly let see all sides of me. Like the parts of myself where I was like, people probably will think I'm a bad person if they realize that I like this thing or whatever. And that was my own limiting beliefs and whatever. But so he was the only person I ever let 100% the way in. And then he left. And my energy didn't know how to regulate or stay or want to stay with him being gone. So part of me my energy wanted to leave my body. So that was why it was so easy for me to numb. But then I would also have really painful thoughts where, like, if I didn't have my daughter, I was like, I don't want to be here. Like, I wish that he took me with him. Like, how
Mm-hmm.
like selfish of him to leave without me, thinking that he thought that I would be okay without him. And that's where we want to like kind of take a second. And that's especially when you want to be reaching out for help. Because for me, I didn't know it at the time, but my energy was just trying to like leave. It was trying to understand. And part of that was like, it doesn't want to be in the body anymore because the body's in a lot of pain too. So that's something we want to work out. You want to look out for. It's okay that you feel like that you're feeling like that, but we want to ground. Even if like we're grounding through grief, we want to ground in our bodies. We want to remind ourselves that we are still here, because our
Mm-hmm.
energies are still trying to keep that like cord going, if there are cords. And that can make us feel very outside of our bodies, very like zombie, like walking through like a zombie. So was that helpful? I didn't
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely. Yeah. I did want to mention something that I turn to that I know
Mhm.
is an easy outlet is drinking. Like
Yeah.
I turned to drinking. So
Yeah,
did my
that's the same way.
family.
Hmm.
I did get to the point where I was like, okay, enough's enough. And I,
Yeah.
went down a different path. I mean, I did
Yeah.
other things like dance. Like as soon as he
Yeah.
passed away, I went and danced and stuff. So I
Yeah.
really
It's
think the
beautiful.
small things that I have implemented have
Yeah.
shifted me to be where I'm at in my life now. However, sometimes I feel like maybe some of my family members haven't fully let that all
Yeah.
be processed. So what would you
Yeah.
say to someone who maybe is like turning to drinking
Yeah.
or coping
Yeah.
that way? Yeah.
So if you find yourself turning to drinking or coping with like a substance or something like that, the question that I want to ask is like, what makes you like, what part of you are you afraid to face without them? Because a lot
Mm-hmm.
of times those individuals, I know for Brian, he helped me face parts of myself that I thought that I was going to keep locked away in the deepest archives of my soul. And so
Mm-hmm.
facing those parts of myself without him was really painful, and I didn't want to. So it was easier for me to numb it out because I could disconnect from that part of myself. I didn't have to
Mm-hmm.
bring it to the surface. Um, and and understanding that like sometimes emotions do feel uncomfortable. And then the other thing I would definitely say is there's a level of forgiveness that eventually has to come. So you are going to feel
Mm-hmm.
angry at one point. Maybe it's not at them. Maybe it's, at who, like, if you believe in God and source and stuff, maybe it's that, maybe it's yourself. I know
Mm-hmm.
I experienced so much anger. At first it was with myself,
Mm-hmm.
and then it was with God. And then
Mm-hmm.
it was finally like I had to process anger that I felt with him. And that was a huge part of it, of like forgiving, and forgiving at each level, forgiving yourself, forgiving, even I think for a lot of people, the issue that we have is that we're not ready to forgive maybe like ways that we wish we would have showed up better, or we're not quite ready, we feel like we needed to do something more. But that level of forgiving yourself, your past self, your present self is super super important. And if you're especially leaning on substances, I would say that forgiveness is probably something that you're avoiding, and we avoid it when we want to stay corded and attached, right? We still feel like we need that attachment for some reason.
Okay. I resonate with all of what you said
Yeah.
because I too went through the anger with God and the anger with
Yes.
myself and the anger
Yeah.
with him. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I think the main one that stayed for a long time until I did forgiveness was the one about myself. I regretted a
Yeah.
lot of things that I didn't do and
Mm-hmm.
should have done,
Yeah.
should have
Me
spent
too.
more time, and I chose
Mm-hmm.
myself. And
Yeah.
so it was really hard, but I
Yeah.
have been working through it, right, with all
Yeah.
forgiveness. And so would you
Yeah.
just say like maybe like a forgiveness meditation,
Yeah.
something like that would
Yeah.
be really good for it?
Yeah, a forgiveness meditation is really great. If you're not really into meditations, because I know, especially if you're in the height of grief, meditating can feel excruciating. I
Yeah.
was like that. And so I turned to journaling. I
Mm,
literally, I think for the first year that after he passed, I would just write notes to him. I would just tell him
mm,
exactly what I'm feeling and how I wish he was here. And I would just let my emotions come up. But eventually, one of the things I might have a client do is write a letter to yourself, like or whatever you need to forgive. Let your emotions out, and then at the end of it, talk about like, I forgive you for this. I forgive myself for this. I forgive this situation and I'm releasing it, because it's allowing you to ground your emotions through a physical action. And when we spend so much time outside of our bodies or in our own heads about something, the act of journaling is something that helps to bring it all back into the body and allow the body to have its own processing as well. So yeah, you can do a forgiveness journal, forgiveness healing that I use for clients all the time. So like if you are somebody who is a healer and you have one of those yourself, that's something that can be helpful too.
Sorry, you broke up a little bit there, so I wasn't sure if you were done talking or if that was my computer.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, I've definitely used the forgiveness meditations, also Ho'oponopono, right?
Yes, I love that. Yes.
That's a good one too. Something that I also think came out of, grief and all of that, are like my anxiety and depression. Not really depression for me too much, but I know family members went into depression. So I know that you talk about with energy work, what are some symptoms of like depression, anxiety, and I think you also work with ADHD, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there are the traditional symptoms, right, that we all know, that are outlined in the DSM-5. But energetically speaking, most of these conditions have other kind of symptoms, I guess, that you could say, or like behaviors or ways that they speak. So I'll start with depression. Depression to me actually can show up in a lot of other ways besides like not being able to get out of bed and feeling hopeless and feeling overly sad. When I am depressed, I am somebody whose energy likes to exist in the top a lot, and it likes to try to like leave and go elsewhere. So what happens is I experience the hyper side effects or symptoms of depression, which means I am packing my schedule. I am what people would probably consider like manic. Like I'm like, I'm like,
no, you're
I don't,
speaking to my soul, because I'm like,
yeah.
do I get manic sometimes? I feel like that happens to me.
It's really just like, I remember like I would be, it's fine on 2 hours of sleep as long as I'm getting my work done and I'm getting classwork done. And, I'm a very productive depressed person is like what one of my friends said to me the one time, because I'm like, okay, I dig in harder into my goals. But I'm not leaving any time for me to feel anything. I'm like, yeah, I'll have a social life and I'll take all these classes and I'll also work a part-time job and I'll also be a single mom and I'll and all that kind of stuff. So that is like the hyper, like you can't slow down. You're just constantly go, 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 go all the time. The hypo is the slowing down, where you don't feel like getting out of bed. You don't feel like you're sleeping all the time. You're not motivated to do anything. You have a disinterest in everything. And so that's where those kind of are. But then also kind of like the in-between for depression is like, you don't really feel like is like a lack of like direction, of like, I don't know what's the point of me doing this, because nothing's going to change. If you notice yourself getting really, really down about like things going on in the world, and it just going to support maybe some more pessimistic views, that would be what I would say is like the start of like feeling depression and energetically kind of starting to go down that line of thought, because that kind of mindset isn't natural to your essence. Now, I have seen where people in people's soul, like soul level stuff, where their energy is more, what's the word I'm looking for? Detective. So like they just need to know more information, or it naturally likes researching. They're not just like jumping feet first all the time. But most of the time, those mindsets of like everything is bad, or what's the point? There's no point in doing anything. Like, why am I even here? Or what am I even meant to do? That's actually much more of there's some type of wound or situation that maybe you experienced in the past, where you're not allowing yourself to fully see yourself. And energetically, what's happening with depression is your human ego self and your soul self are butting heads. So when you start to feel that, what's the point, hopelessness, it's you don't feel safe enough to allow that essence, that whatever part of yourself to come through to give you that direction and clarity. And you feel a little bit directionless because your human ego self is just trying to go in the direction that's safest. But that's an exhausting place to live out off like from. And I felt that way too, where it's like you're just living to survive. You're just living to whatever survival looks like for you. So for me, a lot of times it was being of service to other people all the time, always saying yes. I had a very anxious attachment style, very anxious avoidant attachment style. So those kinds of things can also, and if you have like an anxious avoidant attachment style, you're more likely to experience the hyper side of depression, just so you know. But yeah, so those are some of those symptoms. Any questions on that before I kind of like talk into?
No,
Okay.
very informative. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. And then, so with anxiety, anxiety is one of my favorite things to talk about because, I mean, actually all of it is, but especially anxiety is where I started. Like I started talking about it energetically and stuff. Um, Anxiety and depression and even ADHD, they're all like survival strategies. So your soul and who you are on a soul level is so important to this world and to the collective that that there are specific survival things that click into place. Anxiety is one of them. So anxiety occurs when we experience something in a physical 3D, or even that we're picking up energetically that is like, oh, this could be a threat to this part of our essence, this part of our soul. So we're going to lean into the survival strategy. The anxiety will find whatever behavior it needs to survive. And it's like buying you time. It's like, okay, you need time to process this to be able to create safety so that this part of your soul is truly safe and preserved. So we're going to take over, and then you can come back and process it when either, you're old enough to process it or you're in an environment where you can. But the issue is that we don't necessarily know that. That's not how we're taught to look at anxiety. And so we end up just leaning on these survival strategies, and they just become part of habit. And what ends up happening is your anxiety we're not meant to function from there. So just like we might feel burnt out, our anxiety can be burnt out to then it's starting to blur the lines of like what's actually a threat to us and what's not. So that's where over time we can get where everything feels like a trigger. Everything feels like a threat. And so we're having these panic attacks and all that kind of stuff. But the other thing with anxiety to know is like once you know how it's talking to you, it makes it so much easier. So I created the framework called the anxiety languages back in 2020, early 2021, and it literally tells us like what are some of those behaviors of how it's speaking. So there's overachiever, martyr, pleaser, controller, and number. And each of those have a different root wound that can kind of like direct you as like, what do you need to process right now? But it also tells you how your anxiety expresses itself. So you know that like when you're falling into those behaviors, that's you going on autopilot, protecting a part of your soul, protecting yourself. And so I think that to me, that's always a really powerful thing, because if anxiety is showing up for you, or even depression, that means that there is a better life experience on the other side. If you are actively experiencing those things, that means that there's something better for you on a soul level. So, which is always so beautiful.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And then ADHD. So ADHD is really interesting because it's one of those kind of like very trendy mental health conditions where everyone has it, right? Like everyone's like, I feel it.
That's
Yes.
me, literally. I'm like, I got it all.
Yeah. And one of the reasons for that is just even if we look at like the collective change of like screen time and being in front of screens and sitting all the time, so that we have that, right? And part of that is with that one energetically, what's going on is like you have all this extra energy, and like a lot of people have the energy and energetic desire to like create and stuff. So if we're not putting that energy somewhere, it can make it very hard to like focus and channel into just one like area. But another layer to this is most people are misunderstanding what they think is ADHD is it's actually just anxiety. And so one of the reasons for this is, especially early on, when you live in a home with a caregiver or both caregivers or around adults who are chronically anxious, who have a lot of unprocessed trauma themselves, who are living out of their survival strategies, who are living in a state of fight or flight for whatever reason, even if they don't mean to be, even if your environment was okay, but mom just is carrying a lot of trauma from her lifetime and is just very, very anxious. As a child, we are biologically programmed to pick up on body language, all that kind of stuff, as well as the energy of our caretakers, because it's how we can preserve ourselves. If that's the case, and you don't see the threat, and mom and dad aren't talking to you about the threat or like what's causing this anxiety, your energy as a child is still going to pick it up, and then it's going to be just hyper aware because it doesn't know what the threat is. So it needs to be able to see and hear everything. And there's not really focusing. They did multiple studies with kids where you would have a toddler. I think the one I specifically read was doing it with toddlers. So you had a toddler who was across the room from their parent, and the parent, like toddler, had their back to them, and they were playing with whatever toys, and the parent received a stressful news, like through a text message, and was not like facing the child was not looking at them, and the parent's heart rate went up, and like different things, biophysical markers like changed. The child's body mirrored those exact things. And so, like, without having to look at the parent, without even knowing that anything happened, because that is how energetically connected to our caregivers that we are. And so if that's the case with just not even looking, not even seeing anything, imagine how it is when we are seeing those things. So what happens then is like our bodies are like, okay, we don't know what the threat is. It could be anywhere. It could be everything. And that's how we're starting to learn to like live, and how we're learning to connect with people is taking on their stuff. So what actually for a lot of people it is, and even for a lot of kids, it's actually just anxiety, and then needing to live in the state of fight or flight to be prepared for whatever the threat is. And then that becomes habitual. When our energy is constantly there in our home environment, which is the foundation for us navigating the world, that this is what we believe we're supposed to feel, because mom always felt this way, and this is the way that she stayed safe, and she kept all of us safe. So it sets the stage to experience life through that lens and through kind of like that filter, so to speak, for the rest of your life. And even when you look at it, when you're in fight or flight and you're anxious like that, your brain doesn't take in information the same way. So it impacts memory, it impacts how we're learning, what we're learning. So like even those areas that we see it show up in school a lot, it's because the part of your brain that transfers over like learning long term isn't turned on when we're in a state of fight or flight. So that's one of the other reasons we see it in those ways. It's not going to be able to focus for long periods of time because it's constantly trying to take in all the information it can just to make sure that you're staying safe. So that's what I see actually most of the time with ADHD is it's actually just anxiety, but we think of it as ADHD. Energetically, what ADHD, at least how I have experienced it, is with clients, is what's actually going on is it's really cool. I call it a malfunctioning superpower. So there are some mental illnesses that are like just a malfunctioning superpower, as I call it. It just means that like there is maybe passed along in their lineage, or whatever the superpower is, it can't function at the like level, the frequency that Earth is at right now. And so it doesn't work properly. So with individuals who have ADHD, the thing that's going on is that this superpower is their ability to create and manifest something into the physical like that. So their energy is used to being able to move very, very fast through things, to create very, very fast, to be like, okay, yep, this, and now we're like moving. But it doesn't, because of the level that Earth is at now, it's not working like that. So what's happening is that the energy and the mind is going a lot faster than the body can take in. So it's like this constant like misalignment with the body and soul from the mind, as well as like that needing, but feeling like they need to be moving like this. But that's why the individuals who have like in the past who have ADHD and are like, see themselves as like very successful and all that kind of stuff, they're usually working with their hands in some capacity. And that's because working with your hands also helps to ground your, like working with movement helps to ground you. And one of the best things you can do energetically for this condition is to be doing grounding strategies a lot, like every day. And because you want to bring your energy back into your body and align it with how your body's functioning, it's going to help it to slow down. So I didn't want to talk tangent too long, but yeah.
No. All that information is so important for our listeners. For me, literally, I'm learning so much. One thing I wanted to backtrack really quick is because I have anxiety, and sometimes I be doing some stuff that I shouldn't be doing in front of my children, my child, like, like, I don't know, like, I mean, I'll be honest here. I just like, or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
So how could somebody, me, for instance, I'm asking for me, and I'm sure other people, but how could we go about it? Like, say if, I know it's hard when you're in fight or flight to really make decisions, but say if you are feeling that anxiety rise and you don't want your child to pick up on that, what would you suggest doing?
If you don't want your child to pick up on that, I would suggest taking time for yourself. So especially like the
Okay.
younger they are, like taking a second and be like, hey, mommy's gonna go over here for a little bit. I'm right behind this door, and you can do breathing exercises. You can like yell into a pillow. But
Mm-hmm.
I would say like it is important to let them see you expressing yourself, because I do that sometimes where I'm like, Jiminy Crickets, like I'm just
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm so clenched up. But what I do is I let them know, like, this is so, like, when that happens, Scarlett will be like, what's going on? And I'll be like, it's just like, it's this something with work or something with whatever. So I'm letting her know where the threat is coming from, because what that does is it takes it out of them needing to try to find it. And she can then decide, oh, okay, it's just something that mom is like dealing with. I don't need to worry about it. Um, but also it's teaching her like it's okay for you to feel these things and that other people see it. So you're kind of showing them that like, okay, this is how I can safely emote, this is how I can safely express this emotion. But also take that time to, like, if it is something that is more intense,
Mm-hmm.
doing breathing to like reset your nervous system, because they're especially most tuned into your nervous system and your body. So if you're taking that time to reset your body, it's going to make them feel more at ease as well. And so that's something that you can do. I always, at the end of the night, like, I pull my own energy back. I, cleanse her energy, because it's going to help with sleep. So those are some of the things that you can do. But I definitely would say, like, even you, like grunting or just being like, this is so annoying, is not a bad thing. It's just what you want to do is provide that, like, this is what's going on. You're
Okay.
not saying like everything's fine, like mommy's fine, even though you don't
Okay.
feel fine, because that's
Okay.
what really sets off that they're not going to be able to focus, because you're saying that you're fine, but you don't actually feel fine, and so they don't feel fine.
Okay. That's
That makes
perfect.
sense.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no
no, I love
problem.
that. That's such a great tip. Because sometimes I do feel like, oh no, I just did that and like I don't verbally say anything. I'm just like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
good, you know? So it's good
Yes.
to
Yeah.
be verbally like even though she's a toddler, she understands what she
Oh
can, you
yes,
know? So
absolutely, absolutely. No, their ways. Kids are super intuitive, and they pick up on
mm,
way more than we think they do.
mm, okay, perfect. Thank you so much for that.
Yes.
And another, I guess you kind of just went into this, but
Hmm.
whenever you're going through a mental health clarity session with somebody, or, you're bringing up things, or,
Yeah.
your client has something, what are some modalities or tools that you suggest that they use?
Yeah. So if you are going through anxiety, the first thing that I would try to do, especially if you're like in a place where, so if you're in a place where you're having panic attacks all the time, the first thing I would do is I would start a visualization practice. So your brain cannot tell the difference between a lived experience and a non-lived experience. So I always say, have a safe place. For me, I like to visualize the beach. That's just, I
Me
love
too.
the beach. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, and what you want to do here is not just like picture it, not just be like, okay, I'm taking myself to the beach. You want to physically take yourself there. So, when you close your eyes, what do you hear at the beach? What are the
Mm,
different things you're hearing? What does it feel like for your toes to be in the sand? What are you tasting? Not just what you're seeing, but literally all of the senses, and slow your breathing down. And close your eyes to do that. It doesn't have to be long. You don't have to, you can be there for 30 seconds, but the key is that you want to slow your breath down as you're taking yourself there, it through all of your senses, because then it's allowing your brain to really be there, and your body is going to start to react as if you're in this safe space. And that is then going to kind of reset you, and you can go back and then like make a decision from there, or just kind of see things a little bit more clearly. But that's really going to reset your body. That is the number one way to prevent panic attacks. All of my clients who I've ever worked with who have had panic attacks, once they implement this, they can stop it at any time in any environment. So it is like a super powerful way to do it. Um, and
love
then
that.
yes, if you're like, I'm anxious but I'm not really having panic attacks, the first place that
Hmm.
I would look is, what are you getting anxious about? Like, what are the triggers? And then asking yourself, like, okay, how is being afraid of this, or this like thought process, actually keeping me safe? So instead of seeing it as like the trigger is the problem, I feel so threatened by the trigger, The trigger is actually kind of keeping you safe. It's keeping you in the survival strategy. So how is it keeping you safe? And starting to unpack from there. Because that's going to allow you to see things really a lot differently. And it's going to help you to bring up some things that you're like, oh, I didn't even realize. Because a lot of times we think, oh, the fact that I am a single mom is actually like so anxiety inducing, when in reality, it's not necessarily just because I'm a single mom. It's I have a fear of like abandonment, or I have like that's why I'm very hyper independent. Like I don't like people doing things for me because it makes me feel vulnerable and unsafe. So you have to look beyond the surface of just, oh, it's just this one thing. A lot of times if we're having big reactions to stuff, it's actually layers of things.
Got it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And sorry, looking at my notes here. So how can someone use their intuition to improve their mental health?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love this question. So, the best way that you can do this is by starting to figure out, if you don't already know, what intuitive sense is the strongest for you. Is it like seeing, hearing, feeling, or knowing? There is one that I think is smelling, but I don't use that one a lot, and I don't know a lot of people that do. Once you figure that out, that's also going to tell you what kind of strategies and techniques are going to work best for you mental health wise. So I'm a seer, predominantly, and a feeler. So visualizations work really well for me, as well as like the like somatic exercises and stuff. So it's going to help to clear my nervous system. It's going to help me to see a little bit clearly. But then also, if you have done like meditations before where you're doing cord cuttings are chef's kiss. Like they're the foundational healing that I recommend for everyone, because it gives you a clean slate. It allows you to like look at what's actually yours and what is other people's stuff that you're still carrying. It lets you see maybe where you've left different parts of yourself, of your energy in the past. So I love cord cuttings. You can do those as well.
Me too. I like them. I actually just created a meditation, and we are about to put it up. So I'm excited for that.
Okay. Awesome.
Perfect. And then just how can someone like start this journey? How could they start, using intuitive healing now, even if they haven't worked with you, just something very simple.
So you can start this journey by just starting to spend a little bit of time with yourself, maybe like 2 minutes, a couple times a week, where you're centering your breath and you're just asking your body questions. You're asking your energy questions and see what comes up, and journal it down so you don't have to like remember it, but like there's a place for it. And then just start asking why. One of the biggest things that I did when I started this work was like, I just started to ask why for a bunch of stuff until I got to some more like really deep answers. And that's what you want. If you're like, this, I feel a little bit uncomfortable with some of the stuff that's coming up, or you're like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, how could I, and you're maybe even appalled by like the stuff that comes up, you're in the right place. Like for me, when I'm truly like unraveling stuff, I'm writing things and I was like, I can't believe I actually feel this way. That is so like, what the heck? I'm in the right place. That means I'm getting to what's actually the issue. So yeah, and start small. Don't make these huge goals of like, I'm going to meditate for an hour every single day. Start with 2 minutes, start with 30 seconds. Like, so, and that's going to be really, really helpful.
I love that. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And then something we do at the end of our episodes, we just would like you to give us a good affirmation for this journey.
Okay. I am safe and I am loved. And those are the two things to remember the whole time. Yeah.
I love that. Perfect. And then just the last and final thing, you can go ahead and plug yourself. Where can people find you? How can they work with you?
You can find me on Instagram at Annamarie F. Green. And there's 3 ways to work with me. There's the mental health clarity sessions, which Dakota mentioned. That's what she received. You can join intuitive therapy, which is a 12-week program where we're working one-to-one and we're working through all the stuff. So it's just that deeper level of service. And then there's intuitive mental health, which is my certification program to teach healers, practitioners, coaches how to do what I do, how to understand mental illness and mental health conditions from this level. And I would love for you to join me in any capacity. If you have questions, you can also schedule discovery calls or just slide into my DMs.
Yes, she is so sweet and so easy to connect with. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. We'll leave all the links in the show notes below. And thank you guys for tuning in. We love you guys and have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.